How safe is it for an NPC to go all the way from Mondstadt to the Stadium of the Sacred Flame? We are going to journey through the roads and waterways of Teyvat to answer this very important question, checking the safest routes to get there and, Hoyoverse, the map, it seems to be going very horizontally again. There we go, much better. Anyway, let's get into the inspecting. Okay, who wants to volunteer as our NPC of the day?
Anyone? Oh, pick me! Oh, I know, me!
Now, there are multiple routes an NPC could take to get to Natlan, but before we go via land, the first, more obvious way an NPC might travel to Natlan fairly safely is by water. This is where we're going to talk about how that could even work. So for one, we would have the option of heading off from Dawnman Port. This is first assuming that this is its rough placement. We would head through here by boat, since this way is inaccessible thanks to Clee buying it up, arrive at the port and sail off from there. The only problem is though, Natlan has no port, as far as we are currently aware. I could not find a single piece of information as to how people from outside of Natlan arrive there. Like, I'm sorry, you mean to tell me that Natlan has a booming tourism industry? Okay, how are all the tourists getting here in the first place? So that leaves us with only two other options as the game currently stands. First is arriving at Liyue Harbour from Dawnman Port and heading out from there. Now, no normal person is going to want to take the Liyue land route through the chasm area, and we are after all looking for the safest route to get to Natlan. But let's humour how possible it would be for a moment. There is an adventure at this spot that does also shed some light on this. We know now, with Fontaine and Chenyu Vale being out, that generally people head through Liyue and then Fontaine in order to get to Sumeru if they wish to stay inland. And as it currently stands, ordinary people are not allowed into the chasm. Even after completing its respective world quest, it is still only being used for mining purposes. But even if they could use the chasm as a route to Sumeru, the question remains how? First, you've got to get there, which is a feat in itself. First off, there's a lot of treasure hoarders in this area along the main road. Then we come to a crossroad with a Hilichurl camp right in front of us. This way involves trudging through water and an abyss mage and Hilichurl shooters. This route is a bit safer but also more precarious. Very narrow paths that you could easily slip on and fall into the water. They both join back up at the same spot with another Hilichurl group waiting in ambush. Another group here patrolling the road. One here. Oh, and would you look at that. Another one. So you've made it to the chasm somehow still intact. Now what? Well, we've got an area full of treasure hoarders and extremely dangerous equipment and paths. Our end goal would be this tunnel. However, let's assume for a second that this bridge was even still intact. Even then, it's not clear how you're supposed to get there. This gap here is what it would likely have been connected to before collapse, so let's follow that around. Yeah, except there's no indication as to how anyone could get up here. And look at this guy too. I want to know how he's managed to get up here, because this wooden bridge and path is not connected to anything. Basically, the chasm route is impossible, even for adventurers, as we know. Lumberpick Valley is even worse, that only an adventurer would be willing to take it. There's this one video the Genshin channel released a while back now showcasing a route through this valley, but realistically speaking, this guy would be dead. Just look how many enemies and monsters are along here. How? The other option if we're not heading through the chasm is to backtrack from the harbour toward the inn and take the ferry from there. And while it takes longer, it is a much safer route. This is where we would also join up with our land route, so let's just briefly touch upon Liyue and Mondstadt's connection. Now I just want to preface this first by saying, I know our dear friend Friesland comments that this area is somewhat dangerous to go through, but again, this is probably the safest land route you will ever come across throughout the whole of Teyvat, so I would say it's more than viable. You don't really come across any enemies until the main road here, but this is a route I've covered before in other videos and it would literally take the knights 2 seconds to clear. It's just a few Hilichurls. Other than this, you pass through Dawn Winery, a few slimes along the way, but they're pretty easily avoidable and don't pose much of a threat. But safety along here is Inspector approved, though maybe they should fix up this bridge a bit. I almost tripped and stubbed my toe on that. So far we've surmised that there are 2 viable ways to Liyue, by boat and by road. So let's next analyse the main route most people in Teyvat apparently take. The waterway to the docks on the other side, perfectly safe. And if you decide to hire a raft and go along this waterway too, also safe. Oh, no, what do we have here? Hilichurl shooters. The waterway from the inn is just wide enough that you can easily avoid any shooters on that side, but here, oof. Still, Teyvat's waterways are one of the few ways an ordinary NPC can get around relatively safely. If we were to head by foot along the road from the village though, well now, that is not safe at all. We've got a whole Hilichurl camp blocking this road. No NPC is getting through that without the help of guards. It does not give the impression that the communications office up at the wharf is regularly checking this main route if this is allowed to happen. Very poor upkeep. With this route, you've also got a very high risk of injury since we're high up in the mountains. These stairs, for instance, are missing wooden safety fences all along it. All it would take is one misstep and bam. You've got stray planks just laying all over as well. I might as well just send a postcard now if I'm going to be going on a trip, because I would trip on the planks like going on a trip. Like a vacation. Anyway, the communications office down at the wharf will be hearing about this, that's for sure. Oh boy, and it just keeps getting worse. It's a rope bridge. Look at all these holes in the planks. Those look like they could give out any second. One wrong step and you are a goner. And I mean, I'm glad they've got a bit of a fence here too, but you know, it should really go along the whole thing. Well, minus that huge safety violation back there, at least we've got what looks to be a safe route from here on out. A boat to Lumidos Harbour, and then we have this, for some reason, really confusing part of Fontanian transport. If you're not a trader, you're going to be stopping off at one of the tiny docks at Urinyi's forest, and yet the roads are barely there. And this is what we've got in terms of docks. There's no proper harbour, but stopping at this one would at least avoid any potential monsters. The aquabus routes overall are a very safe mode of transport, so heading through Fontaine is incredibly safe. Eventually though, everything leads back to Sumeru, our only connection to Natlan thus far. And Sumeru is where things get quite difficult for your ordinary person. Sumeru City is the hub through which an NPC would then head for Caravan Rabat, so having arrived from Fontaine, Beta Harbour's route to the city is unfortunately filled with obstacles strewn about and a million tigers. So this is kind of the downside of using the Liawa Fontaine route. Zero road safety. This bridge is also a bit precarious, but assuming you don't run into any tigers along this route, you're fine for the most part. Only risk is loss of limbs, which lets it down a bit. Now if you're an NPC and you don't want to take any of these long-winded routes, you could instead first stop off at Liawa Harbour, either from Dawnman Port or the road, and then board a ship to Port Ormos. At Port Ormos there are a few options, but one involves a road absolutely riddled with monsters. The easiest and most common way would be to take a boat and use the waterway to get to the city, or you could even just stop off at Vimara village. So now that all of our routes have converged at Sumeru City, let's see how the rest of the road to Natlan fares, shall we? Having walked around Natlan's current borders, it looks to also be entirely separated by water from the other regions. An estuary looks to connect to the sea on this side, and then along here it connects back up to Samudra coast. What body of water exists here though isn't particularly clear. We can see also that another waterfall exists here too, so there's no access from Roe Maritime or Beta Harbour, but we could assume Fontaine potentially has another harbour perhaps on this side below the waterfall. The Artist Adrift quest could suggest this, considering his boat crashed right here along Samudra coast, there is that possibility. Then maybe they have a water connection with Natlan from there, but as of now there's no information on any of this. With Fontaine we at least had some information and already knew beforehand that the desert route is not used, but rather Beta Harbour or Chenyu Vale, even before the regions were out. So for the rest of the route, all must lead through here. But before we get to Caravan Rabat, how safe is the road through the jungle? Everything is pretty safe until we get here. Now can someone please tell me what this is all about? Is it not just easier to have a bridge here, or do people head further up and use Vimara village as a crossing? The only other way would be to use a boat from one side to the other. No NPC is going to be using a mushroom as a trampoline. There's also a camp full of eremites right next to this crossing. And Sumeru's environment and landscape as a whole also makes using the roads incredibly treacherous. Adding to that, loads of enemies, and even the withering. After passing the eremite camp, the next obstacle is that the road markings aren't even clear, and this is meant to be a main road. Then it stops and turns into a game of snake and ladders. After climbing the ladders, you've got to maneuver along this really awkward hilltop. It's just extremely inaccessible. At least the bridge seems fairly stable. You're also most definitely gonna have wet socks by the end of this road trip, and maybe eaten by mushrooms if nothing else gets you fast. See what I mean by everything in Sumeru being out to get you? Fungus up there, poisonous mushrooms here, and then a group of Hilichurls right in front of me. More tigers, more eremites, more treasure hoarders. Oh, and I've just tripped on a tree root and died. What? Where am I? So if the jungle didn't already eat you, the desert for sure will. The desert also presents even more environmental factors when traveling, such as dehydration, dangerous temperatures, and of course the sandstorms. Horrible visibility, difficult to navigate, a giant scorpion right in front of me here, loads of hillochells along the main road again, and also this. Are the academia going to do anything about this? Like, oh I don't know, putting signs up, blocking the road off so people don't go this way? A severe lack of handrails? Once we get to this point of the desert, this is where things become more confusing, as there's no clear indication of a road on the map, but this way here might just be one of the routes people take, except you have to go through a ruined temple filled with eremites, fatui, and lethal laser shooting robots. It does look like a road starts here, after that though it just disappears. This is again the problem though, because Hoyoverse haven't made a visible road. Does this indicate that it's rarely used? Otherwise it would be more worn down like other parts of the desert. There is a piece of cloth here at least to indicate that Natlan is this way. Even the tunnel itself is rather hazardous and risky to go through. But finally, as for Natlan itself, on the horizon, even though it's known as the Nation of War, it's somehow miles safer than Sumeru. I wouldn't say that this particular path is bad. These do exist in real life. You know, like those places you can only access at low tide. Though I can't imagine it's easy to transport stuff through. It's more so the getting there through the desert that's bad. Natlan's roads really aren't too egregious. Well, okay, maybe except for the Children of Echoes. This is definitely not Inspector approved. You guys are literally minors for Archon's sake. Do none of you follow safety protocol? Oh my god, I could fall down there and impale myself on that. What are they thinking? And why does the fence just stop in the middle here? Keep it going the whole way. That road down there is meant to be the main road. The only thing is there's no way of getting down. What exactly do they expect you to do? Ride a Teyvat down? That or using climbing gear most likely. And what is that? Oh, it just keeps getting worse. Well okay, minor stat, we've still got some issues here. For example, there are a number of Teyvat along this road and it is not wide enough to avoid them. They will attack you and no NPC is surviving that. The Pokemon make the road an extreme level of dangerous for basically anyone that isn't native to Natlan and has no idea what they're doing. Saurian there, one there and there. Not to mention that while the long neck rhinos are peaceful animals, well, you just better make sure they don't step on you. But aside from that and the odd human enemy, Natlan's main roads are actually largely safe. Oh, and we were so close. I can't say I'm impressed with this. I am in fact the exact opposite of that.
Immeasurable.
Once again, where is the continuity in these safety fences? That is a really long drop, so that rope better be as strong as the Teyvat. I have to say, I honestly expected Natlan to be a lot worse in the road department, but it's better than Sumeru. In terms of the best and worst routes to get to Natlan, I mean sadly they all have to go through Sumeru, unless it's revealed in a future patch that there is another way. But the easiest would still most likely be to either hop on a boat straight for Port Ormos and make your way from there, or the Liyue to Fontaine to Sumeru route. But while these are the best routes, they're all far from safe.